Sure, it's true. Brady Tkachuk took 21 minutes in penalties last game, and it hurt the Sens. So, does he need to settle things down? His coach says absolutely not. To talk about that, let's bring in Sens reporter Claire Hanna. Claire, Travis Green seemed to get a little riled up this morning when they asked about Tkachuk.
I have never seen the Senators head coach as passionate as he was this morning, standing up for Brady. And it's interesting because at the beginning of this season, Travis Green was asked about that balance of, well, do you want Brady to get feisty and fight, but how much do you also just want him on the ice producing? And at the beginning of the season, Green mentioned that it is a balance, but today he stood up for Tkachuk. He said, we are lucky to have him. Any organization would want a player like Brady Tkachuk. And then he really stood up for him in the fact that he said, I hear the outside noise. I hear what fans are saying, that you want your captain on the ice at key moments, especially when they're down a goal or two. But he said, I would rather have a player that was making some of those mistakes and that was passionate on the ice than a player that was meek in the locker room and just sitting there quietly. And Brady Tkachuk, he is a very interesting player because he brings so many key aspects to the game. He's a dynamic. He scores a lot of goals. He's the fighter that we see him to be. But I think that Brady's even working through some of these things right now in terms of when do I get emotional. He sees one of his best friends, Josh Norris, get hit into the boards, so he wants to step up for him, but he knows that there's got to be moments where he reins that back. But I don't think this is a moment to do that, Gino, because the Senators right now, on a 5-game losing streak, we haven't seen that passion come out recently in games. And so right now, Tkachuk is trying to lead those players into the fight and he's trying to get the rest of his team passionate like he is.
And I think the timing's kind of cool, too, because not only is Green defending him publicly, he's also potentially giving Tkachuk a new linemate on that top line as well.
He is. So we think we're going to see Adam Gaudette go up to that top line. As we know, Adam Gaudette is usually on the 4th line. He led the AHL, though, last year in goals. And Adam Gaudette has come in a player that's got a chip on his shoulder. He's been trying to prove NHL teams wrong. He's been trying to show that he can be a player that really contributes. I think he had about a 5-game scoring streak earlier this season. And I believe he's being rewarded by going onto that top line. And when we asked head coach Travis Green about it this morning, he said, you know what, I'm shuffling a lot of the lines. And for Adam Gaudette to go up there, we know he can score. So can he produce now with Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk? But on the flip side, you have to look at who's now getting demoted. And I say that in air quotes because last week I asked Travis Green, I said, well, if your top line is going to have a player like Ridly Greig, and he actually stopped me. He said, well, hold on a second. Which is our top line? And I said, well, you tell me. And he said, I don't know if we have a top line. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, anybody can read into that. If you want to have a top line or not having a top line, you know, say what you will. But I think Travis Green's trying to figure that out, and the team's trying to figure that out. So when you look at Michael Amadio, David Perron, who have typically been on that 3rd line with Shane Pinto, well, now it looks like they're going to be on the 4th line. Is that a message to them saying, hey, let's get going. We need you to produce. You're 2 veterans who come in with so much experience, but you have to show it. So I'm wondering if that's part of the mechanics at work here with Travis Green as well.
You guys also got some news there at Skate today. Not only did the Sens lose last game to the Canucks, they also lost a key member of the D-Corps.
Yes, Artem Zub. He's going to be out for a while. We haven't heard how long. It sounds like it's long term. He's got a fracture in his foot after blocking a shot. But Artem Zub's had some bad luck in terms of injuries this year. He was out with a concussion earlier this season, so he's missed a handful of games. He's one of the most consistent defenders on the Ottawa Senators, usually plays on that top D pairing alongside Jake Sanderson. But now with him out for the foreseeable future, major shuffle on the D pairings. Now, one of the most consistent pairings, in fact, they've played together all 20 games this season, Thomas Chabot and Nick Jensen. But Travis Green has decided to split them up. So we're seeing Jacob Bernard-Docker. He's going to be playing alongside Chabot, most likely. Clevin now will be playing with Nick Jensen. And on that top pairing, you're seeing Travis Hamonic reunited with Jake Sanderson. Now, when Jake Sanderson first started in the league, Travis Hamonic was the guy showing him the ways. And when we talked to Hamonic about playing with Sanderson, he said, you know what, I just try to let him do his thing because Sanderson is going to be such a good young player. But this is interesting just because that Chabot-Jensen pairing has been so consistent. It's kind of been their bread and butter all season, even though it is their second D pairing, to split them up. But I think this is indications that Travis Green is just looking for some solutions right now, and he needs to change something, or else this 5-game losing skid to turn into 6, 7.
I want to ask you about that. Like, listen, no one's going to panic just there yet. It's way too early for that. But what's the level of concern? You follow these guys every day. As you mentioned, 5 straight losses, just 2 wins in their last 9. You spend a lot of time with the guys in the room. Are the guys starting to look around wondering if a shakeup is coming? Do you think Sens management is at that point just yet?
I'm sensing tightness. That's the word I would use to describe the feeling in the locker room, because this is a team that's got a lot of pressure on them. They know that they haven't made the playoffs for the last 7 seasons. These core players know that they've been brought in. They've signed long-term contracts to change the narrative here in Ottawa. And so when it comes to trading one of those key players, I don't think it's out of the question. But when we did hear Steve Staios speak about a week ago, he was asked about that, and he said, just because right now we're going through a bit of a blip. And at the time when Staios spoke, they were in a 3-game losing skid, not 5. But he said, I don't think we're in a dire situation right now. I wouldn't not look at trading a player, but I'm not going to make a change just because right now things aren't going well. He feels like their team's improved. He feels like they've taken a step forward. He also said, I don't think our record reflects how good we are, but you could say these things, but if things keep sliding, eventually some kind of a change is going to have to happen. And I'm starting to wonder at the end of November, when we look at the record for the Senators, and if it's the same sort of record we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years, which has been only a handful, 2 or 3 wins, then does Steve Staios start to consider that option more? And I think he's probably starting to entertain the idea now.
You know what? The timing of tonight's game is really kind of interesting, because as the Sens are falling short of preseason expectations, tonight they get the Flames, a team that's exceeding preseason expectations. Calgary's won 4 straight. They're second in the division. What can the Sens take from facing a fellow team in a rebuild like this now?
Well, I think the Senators look across the ice and say, I wish we were in this position, second in the Pacific Division, while the Senators are second last in the Atlantic Division. They're wondering, how did we get here with all the pieces to this puzzle? And the Flames, I think the difference, Gino, and it's easy, you can look at the stats, Dustin Wolf, Dan Vladar, their goaltenders have really stepped up. Whereas for the Ottawa Senators, you bring in a guy like Linus Ullmark, who's a Vezina winning trophy goaltender, and he just hasn't been performing at this point in the season. I think his save average is .881, while Forsberg isn't much farther ahead at maybe .903, and that's a big difference. But also, there's no pressure on the Calgary Flames. I don't think anybody expected them to be here. We spoke to them this morning, and they said, we're just a tight-knit group. We're working hard. We feel really good in the room, and they don't have those expectations on them. The Ottawa Senators have had expectations on them for the past 2 to 3 seasons, and they're hearing that outside noise, and I think for them, it's hard for them to quiet it down, because they've got those expectations on themselves. And in this preseason, it was the first time we heard them mention the word playoffs, that's the goal. They've shied away from that. Last year, they said, we want to be playing meaningful games at the end of the season. But to use the P word, but now, not be out of it, but be in a really tricky position, it's hard. They're going to have to get that out of that hole. And the Senators know the uphill battle they're facing.
It is quite the uphill battle. Claire Hanna in our nation's capital, the Sens get set to face the Calgary Flames tonight on TSN.